You are listening to Plantastic Events podcast, episode number 11. Hey everyone, welcome to Plantastic Events. I'm your host, Noshin Panjani. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to help you plan your events with ease. Be sure to subscribe at stewjat.com and stay up to date. That's stewjat.com. Plus, you'll receive tons of resources, freebies, guides, and show notes. Thank you for joining, and now let's get into the show. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Noshin Panjani, and today our guest is Courtney Spriggs. She is the Milton Community Outreach and Engagement Manager. She creates community engagement and builds relationship through many community events. Prior to her current role, she spent 15 years in law enforcement. That is just incredible, Courtney. Although she is not in law enforcement anymore, she volunteers as a secretary to the board of directors, and I hope I get this right, of the Sergeant David P. Land Memorial Fraternal Order of Police Lodge number 82. They aid officers and their families in North Fulton and Forsyth, Hall, and Dawson counties. That is truly impressive. And Courtney, I just have to give you a shout out here just to say that to be a woman and in the law enforcement world, I think that's truly empowering. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to all. I think you're just very impressive. And to all the women out there, I think it means a lot to everyone. I've read up into you. I've looked into your background, and I think it's truly fascinating what you do. You've just not only supported the community in so many different ways, yet you still continue. You still maintain your law enforcement background through volunteer work, and you're part of the city. So that truly is wonderful. Thank you so much for doing what you do and empowering the rest of us women out there.
That's right. Thank you.
So my first question to you is, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Your facility here is beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm very, very impressed. I love it.
Thank you. And thanks to Prototype for giving us this chance, too. Can I ask, what inspired you to join law enforcement, and how did you jump to the city of Milton?
Well, I got into law enforcement. My original plan was, when I was in college, was to be a lawyer. And I went to school and I majored in criminal justice. And taking those classes, I met a lot of police officers and got to be good friends with them. And you make plans and life happens. And life's plans were not for me to go to law school. And so I did not get in after a couple of attempts and decided to take a different route. Perhaps that is not for me. So I went to work at the University of Georgia. The plan was to go Dogs, was to get my master's degree and work for the police department. I got a job at the police department. So I worked there very briefly. They put me through the police academy, and I had a great time. And very shortly after that, I went to work for the Lumpkin County Sheriff's Office, so a bigger agency, but still in a small town. And worked on patrol there. But what inspired me to get into law enforcement was really maybe sort of what you referred to in your introduction of me, is that it is not very common for women. But I knew that there was something I could offer in listening, in building community and bringing people together. That really is always my goal, and I guess it always has been. Community was very, very important to me growing up, and continues to be. And so that was an important part of my law enforcement career. In fact, I was hired under a community policing grant in Lumpkin County, and so it always has sort of been the foundation of what I've tried to do. In addition to all the other things you do in law enforcement, community is a strong foundation, but there are a lot of other things. Yeah, it is super difficult.
Yeah. So how did you switch over to joining the city of Milton and what you do now, especially working with different events and just all kinds of festivals, runs, and everything else?
So part of my career in law enforcement involved being the community outreach specialist for the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. And I did that for several years, I think 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
And the biggest part of that job was educating people about law enforcement, and more, you're going to hear me say community about 1,000 times.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
But building community, so educating about law enforcement, but also sharing community resources, again,
Right.
bringing people together. And as part of that, we had one big event called Celebrate Safe Communities.
Okay.
And it brought together all of the different resources in Forsyth County that kept Forsyth County safe.
Right.
And so that's not just the sheriff's office. It's the Cumming Police Department. It's Family Haven, a women's battered women's shelter.
Yeah.
It's the health department. It's neighborhoods who participate in looking for suspicious activity. It's Neighborhood Watch. It's businesses who do those same things.
Wow.
And network with each other. So it brought all of those together on a Saturday morning to sort of celebrate what they did. And
Yeah.
so and it wasn't a party, but it was a mini festival celebrating what made that area safe. And so that was just one instance of the one of the things I did in Forsyth County. But we were always reaching out to the community.
Yeah.
And I know a big part of that in law enforcement is not just educating, but sort of reducing speculation.
Okay.
As you know, in a neighborhood, in a business setting, if something happens and people don't have the facts, or they just see a lot of blue lights when they get to work, and they don't know what
they don't know what to do with it.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't know what happened, and so what starts to happen is they start to speculate or guess about what happened. And so what was really important to the administration at the sheriff's office at the time was to educate people about what had happened and be very transparent
Right.
and share with them the facts. And so if, for instance, something had happened in a neighborhood, say there had been several burglaries, and to prevent that speculation and to share the facts and be transparent, we would go to that neighborhood. I would go as the community outreach specialist. Detectives would go who were working the case. Patrol officers who had responded to those burglaries. We would all go.
Almost like a community going together.
Yeah, a mini town hall meeting,
Yeah.
a community meeting about that. Explain everything that had happened, that was going to happen, and that we hoped would happen, and how they could assist.
Right.
And it was very, very beneficial to those communities and to the county as a whole to share that information, to outreach. And so I did that for years and years and built neighborhood watch programs.
Wow.
If we saw that a crime had been committed in a neighborhood, we would reach out to either that victim or some of their neighbors and say, listen, we have a neighborhood watch program where you can be educated on what to do, on how to prevent this, and what to do if it happens again, and look forward, and be proactive in your neighborhood and preventing this. In addition to, I'll say it again, building that community, bringing people together, because when people talk, things change. So, and what we found as we built those neighborhood watch programs is sometimes people had lived in a neighborhood for 10 or 12 years, had never met their next door neighbor. It was very sad. But
That's so true, though.
yes, but we brought them bringing them together,
Yeah.
and that's why we had meetings in their neighborhood. We came to them.
Yeah.
And so that outreach part, I noticed what a huge difference that made.
Right.
So Forsyth County is huge. I think their population is upwards of 150,000.
Wow.
And so if you can connect people in a community that large, I knew you could do the same thing in Milton, which is much smaller, but retain that small town. I'm from a small town. I'm from Fitzgerald, Georgia. It's in South Georgia. You probably
where's that
have
from?
not heard of it. I know. But that is where I wasn't born there, but I was certainly raised there, and the community raised me. Because in a small, rural, poor community, families have to come together, neighbors have to come together, people have to help one another. And I think what happens in larger, more affluent neighborhoods is you're not so dependent on your community or your neighbors or outreach programs. You've got it all. You can do it, or you think you can do it all, and that connection is missing. And I won't even get into how technology affects that. As everybody stares at their phone, are they really connecting? You're 640 friends on Facebook.
Do you really know
I know.
them?
Are they your friend? Are they gonna? If you're if your husband gets hurt at work and can't provide anymore, are they going to help you with dinner? Right.
Yeah.
That is community, and when community really comes in. But I don't think we should wait on that. I think when I came to Milton as a patrol officer.
Yeah.
Answering calls for service, driving around in a patrol car. But when this position came open, it wasn't the position as it is now. It was a public outreach coordinator, and it was helping plan events. Milton has that same nurturing sense of community in place and desire to do that. And I knew that that was what I wanted to do. Yes.
Yeah.
And though it meant leaving law enforcement, my husband is still in law enforcement. I'm still on the board of the Fraternal of Police, which is a great organization. But I knew that I would still have my connections there, minus the uniform and the car and the gun. I could still make a difference and still make an influence, even though I was leaving the profession.
Right, and I love that about you. I think that you have that community sense involvement and being able to build, that type of environment even in much larger areas,
Yes.
much larger communities. You still bring that family unit back, build that awareness, connect the dots, make sure that people know what's going on, who their neighbors are. If something does happen, their neighbors need to know what's happening, Those type of situations are actually very helpful to learn about.
Right.
So knowing that you do that and knowing that you have that background, that's very, very helpful and very impressive. When you plan for events for the city of Milton, I'm sure that, that you have this law enforcement background and the fact that you're still volunteering in this. What do you think about while it's just pretty much a opinionated question. It's more like,
okay.
What do you do? What do you think about? Do you always think about something when events are going on? Is it always on the back of your mind about how to make changes here or there, what to do? I just wanted to get your background on that.
Sure. Yep. So I do think of that, and we talked earlier about what a different perspective law enforcement gives you. And there are two sides of that coin. It's a good perspective in some ways. It keeps you aware. It keeps you focused on your surroundings and looking out for maybe dangerous situations. On the other hand, you're looking for dangerous situations. And you're not always the life of the party. If your ear is over here because that person's acting suspicious, you're not. You might not be fully present with your friends or family. But so there are two sides to that coin. But I think it's very beneficial in this position now because because of that unique perspective.
Yeah.
I am looking for those dangerous situations, and not just from an event planning perspective, but from a public safety perspective.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes. And so I do. Like I said, my husband is still in law enforcement. Many of our friends are still in law enforcement. I have a strong connection, with the Milton Police Department because of my history there. And but I also keep up with current events. What is happening, not just in Milton, what's happening in our surrounding communities that could affect events, what's happening nationally that could affect events, and seeing what we might need to plan for.
Yeah.
But the safety of people attending our events is certainly foremost
and
as I plan them.
Your mind.
Yes.
Yeah. To have that ability, that even when you're in an event, that's on the back of your mind. You're always thinking about the situation of what could happen.
Yes.
I'm sure you have a very safe household, too, in that case.
Right.
No one should mess with your house.
That's right. No.
A family of law enforcement background. So even in that sense, I know that you plan a lot of outdoor events. How do you handle security if there's a run or a festival that's in an outdoor setting? What do you do to pre-plan, I guess?
Mm-hmm. We do. Well, pre-planning is probably the biggest part of it. And so we take into consideration as we pre-plan who needs to be involved. What is our venue?
Right.
What is our timing? What is who is our audience?
Right.
What specific events are going on? What time of year is it? Who do I need at that event to make security the best it can be? And security not just meaning preventing criminal things from happening at that, but weather hazards,
Right.
health hazards, tripping hazards, ADA compliance, making sure that our events are inclusive of everybody in the community, but specifically safe. And so as we pre-plan, I collaborate with our Public Works Department,
Right.
our Police Department, our Fire Department, our Geographical Information Systems, Communications, and all of those come together to ensure the safety. And so communication and collaboration probably being the most important part of pre-planning. Knowing who I need to talk to, who has ideas on an evacuation route or a detour route, what the fire department can do, and so I guess that is beneficial to being a city and hosting public events, is having access to those experts and all those different resources. When we talk about security, I'm not hiring private security. I have police officers with vast amounts of experience and knowledge who will be providing that security at my events. But if you're planning a different sort of event, say a private concert, I still think that safety should be the forefront, at the forefront. And so even if you're hiring off-duty police officers or hiring armed security, hiring what you need for that event, trying to anticipate that, and pre-planning is a huge part of that.
Yeah. I'm sure that, you have the ability to use the resources that you have just based on the city.
Yes.
But for those folks that don't, you should hire and pre-plan accordingly.
Right.
Knowing what to expect.
Yes, take into consideration, sure.
Yeah, and seeing what's out there nationwide or all of the current events, pre-plan based on situations that happen.
Yes.
And I guess you mentioned this briefly, but I'm sure you have to think about oftentimes like emergency routes, like identifying emergency routes or identifying situations where, I don't know, you have to have an active shooter response plan.
Correct.
Or certain other types of emergency related things like weather situations. Or you mentioned this earlier before we started recording the podcast about if someone's just driving through,
right. If somebody takes a bad turn, and doesn't know that road is closed. So one of the things we planned for Crabapple Fest is our
exciting. We'll be there.
Great. Is our big arts festival the first weekend in October, and so we shut down a road. So to start. To talk about logistics for that event, we shut down a state highway. So even at the very beginning, months and months in advance, we have to get permission from Georgia Department of Transportation. How we have to explain to them that we want to shut the road, what it's for, and what the detour route will be. Because transportation, traffic, is always an issue, and I guess it always will be. But planning for that is paramount. So that's just one of the first steps we take, and I work with Public Works to make sure that we have a safe, even without an emergency, that we have a safe route out. But one of the other things we plan for at that big event, so the section of road we close is probably 1/10 of a mile, and we have vendors in the street. So the street is clear. We have vendors with tents in the road, and we have pedestrians in the street. We have entertainment. We have the huge TV
so many things going
showing
on.
the SEC, showing
that's
SEC
exciting.
football in the street. So all of this is in the street, and so one of the first things we had to consider was, say there's something as and I don't want to say simple, but something there's a lost child. So not specific. It's not as dangerous as an active shooter or a tornado or any of these terrible things that can happen. But a child is lost, and that is very important to that child and to that parent. How can we most quickly get them some help? And so how will they know where to go or who to talk to? And so what we did is divide that, because if you're just at the festival, you're just in the middle of a bunch of people. There's who knows, imagine you're 2 feet tall, and you don't know what to look for. And so what we gave our public safety, the way we divided that up so we can most quickly communicate with public safety, is we divided that up into numbered sections. And we put big numbers up on the light poles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're big red poster boards.
Visible, clear.
Very visible, yes. Well, huge. Probably 3 or 4 feet wide, on the light pole. We got the fire department to put them up for us. But that was so I could say they all have radios, they talk to one another. But that's also that's something to consider as you're pre-planning. How will they communicate with one another at the event?
Right.
So they communicate with one another via radio. And so what we planned was, we have this divided up into sections. You get on the radio and say, I have a lost child I'm in section 1. And so everybody can look up at the light pole and see that's at the beginning of the festival. Right. And you're going to look for somebody in uniform near light pole 1. If they want to get more advanced, more detailed in their location after that, they can say, I'm at the vendor selling birdhouses. In section 1. But we divided that up into sections simply to improve public safety at that event. So they can communicate better with one another. They can communicate better with attendees and provide a higher level of safety to them. So, and all of that, I hope I haven't gotten off track from our question.
No,
but
you're on point, actually.
Great.
It helps
so
to know this.
Comes back to the pre-planning. And so one of the things that we do that is very, very helpful for me is we have what's called an operations order.
Operations order.
And so that is a joint operational order, and that is Public Works, Fire, and Police Department all come together. It has the times of the festival, what the situation is, what our mission is.
Yeah.
For instance, I have with me the joint operational order from last year's Crabapple Fest, and the mission for the police department's portion of it, number one is event and attendee safety.
Wow.
And so it goes from their traffic congestion, parking issues, what to do if someone becomes intoxicated.
And that actually happens. I've seen it.
Absolutely. Well, alcohol is served at that festival, so it could absolutely happen. Yeah. And then it talks about the execution. What's going to happen from the time we shut down the road the night before? Who's going to be in position? Who the contact is for that?
Yeah.
And then what will happen throughout the day?
Wow.
And then it goes through what the fire department will do in certain situations and what their mission is, what's expected of them. It also has everyone's contact information. It has maps of the event, so people can get their bearing, see where they are and exactly where we're talking about. So, and everybody has a copy of this day of to refer to, or last year we had it digitally, which was fantastic.
Okay, yes. Technological improvement.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So people could refer to it on their phone, even pull up those maps on their phone. So my hope is to improve that. Actually, with your app.
Thank you. That's a plug. Nice plug.
So hopefully anything we can do to improve safety for both attendees of the festival and the people providing that safety is again very important. Probably the most important thing as we plan.
Yeah, I loved how you described you divvy them up in different sections too. That you have almost like section 1 or this area or that location. This is where a lost child is.
Right.
I've seen events and I've seen different functions where I've seen children missing, not knowing where to go, what to do, who to reach out to.
Right.
And it just causes chaos. But when you have all of these things pre-planned, when you already have, like you said, your operations order too, you give it to everyone before the event. They have it with them. They have all the contact information that they need to reach out to, the appropriate people to contact, and they're dispatched on time. That's the work that needs to be done for all events. I wish that.
And it doesn't happen. We certainly use one template, but there are a number of templates for event security, and it really would be event specific. If it's a music festival, a nighttime music festival in the summertime with alcohol, but no ticket sales, you're going to have a very different audience than if you have a symphony at a high school. So you have very different, it's going to be different levels of security, different things are needed at different ones. So I don't think there's one particular way to provide safety, but it certainly needs to be considered. And what has to be considered is unfortunately all the different things that could happen. So trying to anticipate those really is probably the hardest part, but very important.
Different probably emergency routes in that case too, right? I would say,
Sure.
Obviously an outdoor event you would have different emergency routes, and then indoor events you would have different emergency routes. But
Correct.
probably pre-planning in that sense too. Let's say if there's a live concert or a music event that's happening indoor, that the event planner or the event organizer should already learn about that area probably beforehand,
Absolutely.
Where they're located.
Well in advance, I would say.
Well in advance, where are the doors, where are the exit
How
doors.
are they marked?
Yeah.
Are they accessible from the outside? I know you all have seen those stories where there was a fire and people couldn't get out because the back door was chained and that just wasn't addressed.
Oh, man.
So making sure that those things are taken care of, physically checking them, you or your designee checking them beforehand is very, very important.
So having that response plan already planned out in advance. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's actually interesting. I'm just curious, do you oftentimes have to deal with like controversial speakers, you know? And I'm just giving this example because there's a lot of political political issues that are happening in our current events,
Absolutely.
you know? And that also ultimately leads to sometimes peaceful protests, but also many times that could become problematic when you have a controversial speaker coming in and you have to manage that event. Unfortunately, sometimes even you may not be okay with the situation that you have to take care of, but then you have protests or riots at the same time. How do you handle situations like that, and what advice can you give to our listeners?
Fortunately, I have not had to deal with anything that controversial. You know, people are. I get to fun. Let's talk about why I got out of law enforcement, right? So I can do fun things. I'm kidding, but so I haven't had to deal with that. But in law enforcement, we did have to deal with, say, a very controversial situation. At a town hall meeting, or people are angry at something that the sheriff's office or the police department have done, and those people are very, very angry. Fortunately, I haven't had to plan security around the people being so angry they were protesting or rioting, and that, to me, that is almost specifically a law enforcement. I mean, that's who would be dealing with that.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
If you know. If you can anticipate that something is going to be controversial, addressing that ahead of time is absolutely key. Getting the proper people in place to take care of that, upping security if you need to, the protection even of that person who is controversial might need to be notched up. They might need people around them. They might need to wear clothing that protects them. They might need so you're also you're protecting, even though you're protecting the people who are protesting, you're protecting the person they are protesting.
Yeah.
So thinking about all of that is really going to be very law enforcement specific, I think.
Yeah, because you have to help on both ends too. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
not just the speaker. It's also maybe the protesters.
Right.
It could be either way. Who knows? You know.
Nobody. The goal is for no one to get hurt.
Right.
Ultimately.
Right.
So keeping that in mind and trying to anticipate how they could get hurt. Is how you would start to plan, but I can't. I mean, there's so many different factors in planning those. Again, venue, location, audience,
additional layers of security that involves around all of that. I'm sure it's
right. But again, it would come back to even though it's law enforcement specific, it would come back to communication and collaboration. Working with other people, communicating what your needs are, and making sure they're met prior. So there are no surprises.
So I'm sure, like in those type of events, I'm sure it's for city, the city can use their resources, but for other folks, they would probably have to hire, police law enforcement or other security events that are out there.
Sure.
But it could get chaotic, and it has happened, like in school events too.
Yes.
And it's happened recently.
Absolutely.
Just with many of the different events, or football, it just happened recently too.
Right. It really can happen anywhere. I mean, anything can happen, as we know. In a changing. In a changing society, but I think anything can happen anywhere. But I think planning and trying to anticipate that, sort of walking through it before it happens. What would you do? Even personally, I used to teach women's self-defense, and we would teach those the women taking those classes. Think through what you would do. What in this event? If someone is trying to get in your car, what would you do? And so you're doing the same thing at an event. If a terrorist is going to drive a big truck, through my event, how can we prevent that? And so we've talked through that, what our response would be, how we're going to try to prevent that, what our response would be if it happened, and what the aftermath would be, how we'll do that. So all of that, I think it's helpful to work through that before it happens. Sort of
pre-plan, pretty much. Exactly the same
we
thing
used to in law enforcement, we used to talk about muscle memory. So as you do something over and over and over again, shooting or drawing your gun or clearing a house or crouching a certain way. You do that over and over again. And it builds confidence, and it builds, your memory remembers that. Your brain remembers what to do in that situation. So there's always going to be a level of surprise and panic.
You build that muscle memory.
But once past that, now your brain knows, I need to call 911. I need to remember, this certain thing and do this certain thing, and your brain has done it before, so it has something to refer to.
Yeah, and I think obviously for law enforcement, it's muscle memory that's already built in, so they learn it over and over again. In the situation, if this happens, what do you do next? Like the self-defense class you taught. I've taken a self-defense course, and I remember even for martial arts
Yes.
in general, but we were zip tied, and in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, if this does happen, I have no clue what to do. They taught us how to break through with it.
You do now, right?
Now I do, but also it was just scary at the moment because in my mind, mentally, I'm going there. I'm visualizing myself in that event, in that situation. I was nervous, even though there was nothing around it, but it built that muscle memory.
Exactly.
If I do it repeatedly.
So imagine in a panic, if that was a real situation, how your adrenaline is going to be high, you're going to get tunnel vision, your hearing is going to go, and so you're going to need that to draw back on. This is what I did in class.
Yeah.
And fortunately, you have that. So to me, it's the same for events. Planning for those, walking through exactly what could happen, should happen, is going to happen. Gives it sort of the event, the event, and the people at it something to refer to.
Exactly. And I guess for ordinary folks like us, me, not you, you've had so much experience in building those type of muscle memories. But what about local citizens? Like, let's say if there is an event happening and they notice something suspicious, some suspicious activity that's going around them, what kind of tips would you give them or advise them on what to do, how to react, and just be aware of their situation, like what's going on, or
so key to that. If we back up, they would have to notice
yes,
what is going
very
on.
True.
So being situationally aware.
Yeah.
And by that I mean using all of your senses, and this is very hard to do. I know it is, but if you focus on it as much as you possibly can. So using all of your senses to see what's going on around you. So your sight and your hearing, what do you hear around you? Is it strange or different? Is it something you're used to? Is it something you need to pay more attention to? Is it louder? Is it softer? Smells, touch, so just paying attention to things. And I'm not saying you don't have to meditate, as you
be silent,
super mindful, right? You don't have to do that all the time, but just paying attention to, I talked about on the way here, one of the things we talked about your perspective changing as a law enforcement officer. One of the things I do that maybe civilians don't is pay attention to cross streets and landmarks. And I try to know exactly where I am, because I know if I have to call 911, their first question is going to be, where is your emergency? And I do not want to have to answer, I don't know. Wow. So I pay very close attention briefly. It doesn't take over my day, but I do focus on what street I just passed and what, so to me that is second nature. I know, but I know it's not to everybody. But training people or asking people to pay attention to their situation, attendees at an event or at a concert, anywhere, just paying closer attention to where you are so you can notice suspicious activity. And so people have different ideas about what is suspicious. Is that suspicious, or is it do I think it's weird, or am I being silly, or and so
you second guess yourself too sometimes.
You certainly do, and that is certainly human nature, but listening to that instinct is very important. So paying attention, being situationally aware, listening to your instinct. If it seems weird to you, it's weird. It doesn't matter if it's weird to anybody else. It doesn't matter if nobody else is reacting to it. You can still react to it.
Yeah.
Probably my next advice would be, it depends on what that situation is. You probably need to move away from it.
Yeah.
And as you're moving away from it, alert an authority. That might be calling 911. That might be talking to the security guard who's nearby. That might be, if you're in an airport, it would be different. So depending on what the situation is, reporting that suspicious activity. And again, people hesitate to do that because they've already second-guessed themselves. Well, either maybe they haven't even noticed it. So they haven't noticed it.
Right.
Or they noticed it and talked themselves out of doing anything about it. Or rationalized their instinct, talk themselves out of it, and then don't report it because either they don't want to get involved, or
they're just afraid. You don't know what to
or
do.
they're scared, right? So you would just have to be brave and step up and report that and get involved because it may. The safety of other people might depend on it. If you see a backpack sitting on the ground. And that used to be so innocuous, but now it is. It is. It could be very, very dangerous. And so don't move that backpack, but move yourself away from it.
Yeah.
And just let somebody know. Somebody with some authority. Let them know. Right.
Not your next
Not
door.
your friend. Right.
Right.
Look at that weird backpack. But let an authority figure know so that they can take care of it. And that really protecting yourself and being a good witness is all law enforcement needs civilians to do. We don't need, heroic acts of bravery are wonderful. They're great. But they can be very dangerous. And we have security and officers and fire personnel trained.
In place for that.
Yes. Yeah. They are trained public safety. They know exactly what to do, and they're very good at their jobs. But we do need good witnesses, and we do need people to pay attention and report things because there are only so many of those.
Yeah.
There are only so many police officers, there are only so many firefighters who can do things. And so when they are not in a certain situation, we do depend on the community and civilians and people attending these events to help out, at least to report things so we can
say something. Yeah.
Sure.
I think I was chuckling initially because I always have the weirdest instances at the airport. I think one of the cases was this lady was sitting next to me and she's like, "Can you watch my backpack, my book bag? I'll be back." And I was like, "Okay." And my brother comes back and he's like, "Are you watching somebody else's book bag? That's not allowed."
They tell you not to do that, right?
They tell you not to do that. How do you manage to put yourself in a situation like that? I'm like, I don't know. She'll come back. I'm not even sure what I'm doing with her book bag. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, she came back, and fortunately, she was normal. But
everything
in that
fine,
situation, right? I was nervous, because I didn't process it. But after I realized it, that maybe I probably put myself in a situation that I didn't need to. Or I think there was another instance when this lady was like, "Can you watch my 3 kids?" And I was like,
goodness.
"Oh,
that's
okay."
a big ask.
Yeah. And I sat there and I was like, okay. And I'm watching her 3 kids, like staring at them. They're staring back at me. And I'm like, I don't know where your mother went. Fortunately, she came back. But it's like those type of situations. You need to be aware. You need to know how to react correctly. And I think one more case was someone was suspicious of me. I was on the phone with my mom talking in a different language, of course, and she pats me and she's like, "Excuse me, I just want to make sure, who are you on the phone with?" And I'm like, "It's my mother."
Oh my
She's like, "Well, you're speaking in a different language." And I was like, "It's my language."
People are something else.
Exactly. It could happen. You have the strangest things that can go on.
But you know what, Nosheen, in her mind,
she's being aware.
She thought she was, which is
it's not a bad thing.
Strange behavior, but there are certainly other ways she could have handled that, but
at least she's aware.
Yeah, it sounds like she was
a little too aware.
Yeah,
she even approached me. That's a little strange too.
That is.
But it's interesting. It's interesting the things you encounter, and you do. Like I've had 3 instances already.
Yeah.
It happens. You have those situations. You have to be aware of your surroundings, and you have to speak up. You have to say something. If you see something, say something. It's like what New York slogan, I think, or something.
I think it's Homeland Security.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay, I don't even know.
Yes.
No, I've seen signs
It's
everywhere.
so important, though. It is so important.
Exactly. And I wanted to ask you, I know since you work with City of Milton, you may have upcoming events that you would like to share with our listeners, and a lot of them are Atlanta locals. And we actually do have quite a few now that are growing globally, so that's exciting.
Fantastic, right? I hope they can come to a Milton event.
I would be excited if they could.
That would be awesome.
But if you don't mind sharing some of them with our listeners.
So next Saturday, so not this coming up Saturday, but the 24th, at 7:30 in the morning, we have the Milton Mayor's Run.
Yay.
And the Mayor's Run hosts Jog for a Cause. So we always had the Mayor's Run, but we wanted to take on a charitable something to go with it. So we partnered with North Point Pediatrics for Jog for a Cause, and this is the 15th, their 15th Jog for a Cause. And the proceeds of the race benefit 3 local families who have children battling cancer.
Wow.
So, again, bringing community together to help people who are in need. So you can register online for the race at jogforacause5k.com, and that's the number 5. Or you can register the day of. It's cash or check only, but you can register. On the 24th, we'll be at Freedom Park in Milton. And it's a 5K. It's a Peachtree qualifier, which I know is very important to some
Yay.
people. So, it's also a flat, fast race, which I'm not a super runner, but I run, as part of my exercise. Flat would be very beneficial to me. That would help me choose a race.
I like flat.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good one. We also have a number of events that you can find on the City of Milton website. But one of our most exciting coming up fairly recently, or fairly soon in April, is a new event called the Milton Rock for Rescues.
Oh, cool.
You can find information about it online, but it's a music festival, a community music festival, and we're going to showcase local rock bands, the Chip McGuire Band,
Wow,
a Slow Boat to China, Pony League, and Lenny and Amy Joy. Are going to perform at different times throughout the day. Yeah. And we'll have food trucks and a cocktail truck, local vendors. Yeah, right. Most people, that's a big draw. Local vendors selling, retail. We'll have restaurants. Mm-hmm. And so it's really going to be a good time. And all of the proceeds from that benefit 5 different nonprofit animal rescues in the area. Well, national and local animal rescue organizations. So it really brings together Milton's love of music and animals. I don't know if there's a better combination. I certainly love both. Right. So it's a free event. All of our events in Milton are free. And we, again, the goal of them being to build community and bring people to Milton and together in Milton. So those are 2 big ones coming up, but we have a whole number. Crabapple Fest, which I referred to in the interview.
Very exciting.
Is huge arts festival. 100 juried arts and antiques vendors, food, music, SEC football, beer, kids activities.
The best combination.
Right. We have kids activities, bounce houses and rides and things like that. So it is a big event. First weekend in October, always. That probably is our signature event, and it is really a lot of fun. It continues to grow and bring people together. It started as a very small antiques festival,
and then it grew.
It has really, really grown. So that makes me happy.
And to all the listeners, we'll share all of the events that you shared with us.
Great.
We'll share it on our site as well.
Okay.
And on our resources page, just to make it easier for people to navigate through.
Okay.
And we'll share it just along with your page, as well as possibly even promote it out on our end as well.
Some of them also have Facebook event pages, so people can RSVP if they're coming.
Yeah.
It sort of helps me get a head count as we talk about pre-planning.
Yes.
Also very important. I had a couple of other resources to share about security. And so one, and I'll give you the links maybe to share.
And I can add that on the page as well. Yeah.
Awesome. But one was a Georgia Tech event management checklist.
Yes, you mentioned this earlier.
It is really, really good. I was so impressed with how wonderful it is. But its first task is convene committee for pre-planning meeting.
Exactly what we talked about.
That goes right in line with. So that I'll send you the link to that.
Yes, please.
But it was great. And then the Bureau of Justice Assistance had a big packet, a PDF online about challenges and principles that law enforcement looks at as they plan security for big events. So it could be, it might be a multi-agency event, but it had really good information on different things to consider: communications, pre-planning, considering what threats and impacts you might be facing. So great information. So I would like to share that with your other planners.
That would be amazing.
That listen. So I thought they were both really good documents.
And very beneficial, especially if they're early on in the stages of event planning.
Yes, for sure.
That would really help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia Tech, I didn't even know about that. So it's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. But again, it means so much to us that you joined us today on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I know.
I told you how much I love podcasts. I can't wait to say I was on one.
And you did it fantastically.
Thank you so much.
But it does mean a lot, and you are truly empowering for all of us women out there. It means so much to us. And being involved in the community that you do is also by itself just so meaningful.
Great.
So thank you for what you do, and thank you for being on this podcast. I know you have a busy schedule, so for you to be on this, it means a lot.
You're welcome.
And thank you, listeners, for joining. We may invite her again, by the way. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nasheen.
Although the event industry includes a lot of stressful work and late meetings or late events, just remember, that every event you help to bring to life creates memories of a lifetime for many people out there. Did you love this episode of Plantastic Events? We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. Each week, we'll give a shout out to the Reviewer of the Week. Also, don't forget, we have resources available at stewjap.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time. Goodbye. Produced by stewjap.com. Music by Justin Mahar.